Hello, you're watching World Talks. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. Now, hybrid warfare is increasingly playing out in Poland through sabotage, cyber activity, and disinformation campaigns, where attribution itself becomes a strategic weapon. As incidents are framed in public discourse, often around nationality rather than verified responsibility. The result is growing tension in Polish-Ukrainian relations and widening space for Russian influence operations. Now, to discuss it all further and get the details, we're now joined in the studio by Aleksander Olech, Head of International Cooperation at Defense 24. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
So this is quite an interesting report. Let's tackle it now. So if we're looking at all these attacks, sabotage, cyber attacks, disinformation, espionage, tell to our audience which one of those is the most, let's say, dangerous right now. Which do you see most threats to Poland?
The problem is that if we add into account all those attacks, then Poland is the most attacked country in the world. So the thing is the combination. If we look like at the French Republic or the US, they are also as a target for the Russian Federation, but not at as many layers or using sort of different tools. So Poland is some kind of a laboratory for the Russian Federation. So this information is extremely useful. So one tool, but then you have hundreds of cyber attacks every day. But then when you add arson, diversion, sabotage, even transferring explosive materials, so having as many different tools and then checking which kind of methodology applies to Poland, you have final hybrid warfare. From our perspective, as for now, war is carried out by using tanks. But in this report, we are trying to point out that war could be also as a tool, but by using simply hybrid warfare methods. So this is the thing. Poland is the main target, and if we just count single attacks and then we put all into one basket, you can find out that those different perpetrators that were using different sort of small pieces or being part of small actions. But at the end of the day, whether they were aware or unaware, they have become a crucial tool for the Kremlin.
Mm-hmm. Now, for some following this, they'll know why Poland has been targeted. I mean, it is a logistics hub. It's important for NATO. But explain us a little bit more the reasons why Russia and these attacks are so much focusing on Poland.
So everything has started in 2020. As you know, Poland being more and more attacked by the Russian Federation. Also, they are using Belarus as a part of their activity. Also, they are using Ukrainian citizens as much as they use Poles, for instance. So the case is that since 2022, when the war started, of course, it has increased because we are not only a hub for military support, but also for this humanitarian help. Also, we are the eastern flank of the NATO and the EU. Moreover, Poland is actively vouching for, putting more pressure on the Russian Federation. And then, of course, we are trying to support our friends in the Baltic states. And finally, Poland is investing a lot in the military equipment. So having all this in mind, Russia found out that it would be extremely useful for them to try to wound a NATO country. Because if you try to wound a NATO country and you do not obtain a proper answer, then you are creating an image that Russia can easily wound in general NATO. So they are trying and they've been trying for past years using, as I mentioned, different tools, and they added into this very interesting area, of course, the relation between Poland and Ukraine. So Poland has become a crucial supporter to Ukraine, but at the same time, Russia is trying to play this narrative of anti-Ukrainian minority here in Poland. So finally, we have an example where Russia is checking all tools here in Poland, and then it applies everywhere. In Europe, in the US, on the African continent, in the Middle East. So that's why we are so outraged writing this report, having so many things at the same time, because if you read carefully this report, all perpetrators are there, all attacks that we could write about. Because the saddest part of this report is that we haven't written everything. So if you look today at this scale, you should at least triple it.
In the report also, I'm curious because you mentioned that you called Russians kind of using Poland as a laboratory of testing different means and measures. At the same time, the awareness gap is also there, I think, a little bit. But I guess, what is the counter? Let's say, does Poland have, I mean, we've been reporting on it a lot, and this is increasingly becoming more of awareness to government, but does Poland, in your mind, have enough in terms of deterrence? Is it doing the right things? Or what's still missing in order to counter? I mean, it's hard to counter all these different vectors, but does it have enough right now to counter it?
We've been trying for years. Of course, with every and each attack, we develop, we improve, we repair. Of course, for Russia, it would be easy to show that, yes, we have attacked a NATO country, and then there was no response. However, we do offer and we do carry out actions with offensive manner. And also, we pointed out this in our report, so we have this offensive approach. But if you ask about these countermeasures or about internal situation in Poland, of course it's extremely challenging. Also, during presidential campaign, under upcoming parliamentary elections, because the term Russia or being pro-Russian, being anti-Ukrainian is often to use. I mean, we are using that much this term of being, for instance, pro-Russian, that is a part of our daily language. Moreover, whenever drones falls in Poland, we are always asking ourselves whether it is an Ukrainian drone or a Russian drone, and then the society is afraid. Because we do support Ukraine, and then Ukrainian drones are falling in Poland, or Russia is playing narrative that those are Ukrainian drones. They invest hundreds of millions in social media. And finally, of course, we pointed out this in our report. If you look carefully at our charts, you have perpetrators, but those perpetrators have passports. But passport is not telling you everything about the person, because the person could possess simply, the Ukrainian passport, but he's not Ukrainian. But at the end of the day, the message to the society is that the Ukrainian national carried out a malicious activity here in Poland. But also you can play with this data. If you take into account dates from 2022, 2023, the majority are going to be the Russians. If you take into account from 2024, 2025, 85% are going to be Ukrainians. You can use as much as possible those numbers in order to support your own narrative. That's why we wanted to offer the whole picture, and they point out that the most important thing as right now is to strengthen cooperation between Poland and Ukraine, not only between politicians, President Zelensky, President Nawrocki, Prime Minister Tusk, new Minister of Defense in Ukraine, Fedorov, but also between security services, between think tankers, NGOs, just to talk more about the cooperation, because what we are lacking now is to underlining strong cooperation between Kyiv and Warsaw.
And also one of the things that's also popped up is the financing of all of this. I mean, we often see that that's a critical element. Often this comes down to cryptocurrencies. So tell us a bit more how much crypto plays in this and what can be done about it.
With crypto, it's not that important here. Why? Because some tasks are going to be fulfilled without being paid that much money. For instance, we pointed out that some perpetrators, they obtain $7. Then many of those people that are into this Russian web, they are unpaid, or they are unaware that they are carrying out activity for the Russian services. So with cryptocurrency is developing, but not that much here in Poland and Europe, as for instance with regards to Arab countries and for instance activity on the African soil. Because here it's much easier to give money through online payment or offering payment here on the Polish soil, or finally to promise something, because many of those people, they were promised to obtain something, but at the end of the day they got nothing. And this is very interesting, that if you follow the Russian web, of course they are very skilled Russian even mercenaries operating in Poland, but they prefer to use people that they are unaware that Russia is truly behind this engagement. But crypto is something we are looking at, and we unfortunately do see that, for instance, in the French Republic, cryptocurrency and the Russian link is growing.
You mentioned African soil. Let me ask you that as well. I know you've written also a report on the Wagner Group, which is now the Africa Corps, under direct command of the Defense Ministry of Russia. We've seen now in Mali a withdrawal of exactly that group, of the Russian mercenary group retreating or withdrawing, how you phrase it. What do you make of that? Is that part of something wider? Is this now Russia weakened in Mali and in the Sahel? How do you make of it?
I call it loosening, like being a coward, so let's use in proper terms, because this is what we have expected and this is what we really appreciate having us right now, because underlying all over the world that Russia, again, had promised something and then failed, this is what we need, because they are really great. And unfortunately, we have to say it, Russia is great in disinformation, or when they are called it public diplomacy. So here, they promised something to Mali, they kicked out the French Republic, and then they, at the beginning, they won, for instance, Kidal city, and yesterday they simply gave up. They were begging to be released and leave the city. So this is pure example that if the Russian Federation is promising you something and is saying, we will provide you with weapons, with money, even with simple things like food, because there are poor people there in Africa, in the Sahel region, they are not going to fulfill their promises. So this is the image we have to present, we have to explicitly show to the whole audience, because Russia lost in Mali, they are losing in Burkina Faso, they are losing in Niger, in Sudan. Russia is losing in Africa. That's why they are using African citizens to play their games, and unfortunately they are bringing African citizens to Europe to fight in Ukraine, and sadly they are taking African resources to fund their Russian war machine. That's why we need reports, we need to talk about it.
And also, I think this is a fascinating report. I think it's going to make the rounds also in different languages. Yes. Thanks so much for coming in. So our guest, Aleksander Olech from Defense 24. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary.